Medium, at least. So we're at time. Do you want to give people another minute, or do you want to kick off?
I'll give people a couple more minutes.
Okay, we're going to give people 2 more minutes and then start.
I'm laughing back after because I pasted that slide for my meeting. There's one more. Misplaced
UFMRG.
I bought something.
UFMRG.
Oh, you already fixed that.
That's okay.
Yeah, I misspelled ITF. That slide has been in there at least four readings probably.
How'd you spell it? IEFT?
Yeah,
That's how everyone misspells it. That's the standard misspelling.
Yeah.
Good job. Okay, so this is the last day of the IETF. This is the last session of the last day of the IETF. Welcome. This is the OpenPGP working group. There may be a few more stragglers coming in, but we're going to get started. We are your co-chairs, Daniel Kahn-Gilmore and Stephen Farrow. If you haven't signed in, please sign in. There's a blue sheet here which has a lie on it, but you can also sign in other ways. If you haven't seen the note well all week this week, you can see it here now. This describes your responsibilities here at the IETF. And we encourage the usual behavior for hybrid meetings. There's some tips on this slide. Again, if this is your first meeting at the IETF, please take a minute to review the slide. The slides are all linked if you're signed in here. And we ask people to be reasonable with each other, behave well, don't attack people. If you need to attack an idea, that's fine, but not the people. And please contribute positively to the work of the working group. Our agenda today is fairly simple. We have 2 parts. We will look at the status of the crypto refresh draft, which is the main piece of work that we are chartered for. And then we will have a discussion about rechartering the working group. So does anyone want to propose changes that need to be made to the agenda? Going once. I see online a note that says there are people in the room. Surprise. Yes, there are some people in the room.
They're almost all sitting out of the camera view.
Yeah, the camera view is not great for this room. Yeah, a few more people coming into the room too. Are we early?
No.
Okay. Okay. So this is the agenda, and we'll start with this. I might just stand up to do this so that people aren't just looking at us sitting at the table.
They want you to know some other slides.
So just a brief report back on what has happened with the crypto refresh since our last meeting. At the end of our last meeting, we said we have a couple more weeks to go, just a bit of tune-up. And we did a fair amount of tune-up that took about 12 weeks. So, you know, close. The main changes, the substantive changes I've listed here, they are wire format changes and some cryptographic key derivation changes. So I don't intend to go in detail through all these things, but if you had implemented draft 08, be aware that draft 09 and draft 10, which is the current one, do have these changes that do affect things that are on the wire and how your keys are derived if you're using the X25519 and X448 new key constructions. We have some backwards compatibility fixes. Removing the salted hash is a backwards compatibility fix, and we have more test vectors. So if you have implementation, please make sure your implementation can cover those things. And then better guidance for implementers by having some terminology changes to update for folks who know 4880 and are looking for the same term but can't find it because we used more sensible language. That's terminology changes. And then upgrade guidance helps as a summary of sort of what the diffs are between the protocols of 4880 and what we've added or tuned. And then the IANA considerations cleanup was pretty substantial, but non-substantive. It was large because we tried to put everything that had been sort of an implicit registry into an explicit registry and in tabular form after a conversation with IANA about what they wanted. So I think we are in better shape there now. If you have an implementation or you're an IANA nerd and you want to look it over and give feedback again, you know, we want to hear that, but I think it's in much better shape now than it was. And draft 10 was just a cleanup to fix an erratum that was reported. So we had an ASCII code point wrong for 20 years, and it got fixed. And then a cleanup about the IPR status. So anybody have anything they want to remark on for this status update? I see our area director coming to the mic.
So hi, Roman, as area director, I want to reiterate to the working group a big and profound kind of thank you. I got the document in PubRec. It weighs a lot, and to give everyone kind of status on where I am with that, because I know everyone's waiting for it to get out. I've been talking with the chairs. I'm on page 71. I still have a little bit to go, and I will continue to kind of press forward. It looks like for my quick skim, I mean, no kind of commitment. I mean, I have probably a little bit of feedback on MTIs, but otherwise, wow, you guys did a really great job kind of cleaning it up. So kind of give me a little bit more time.
Thank you, Roman. Had we written a shorter draft, it'd be done by now, right? Okay. So Roman just covered this slide, so. Right. So there are a few open merge requests that are sort of editorial merge requests that, depending on the position of the AD and the final review as we go through into publication, may get added. The three minor ones that are up here are sort of labeling and typographic changes, but there's one larger outstanding one that cleans up the terminology about packet tag and packet type. Again, it's not a substantive change, it's just a change in the language, and depending on the feedback that we get, we will either use that or not and keep the old packet tag, packet type subtle confusion that we've had, again, for 20 years. But these are not substantive changes to anything on the wire or any cryptographic schedule.
So, and I think the plan was to address these or not as we get AD review comments, right?
Yeah. So, okay, so assuming that we can get this draft released, that basically completes what we have in our charter. So we have this open question about shall we recharter? And people have submitted several presentations about things that they would like to see included in a recharter. So there's some interest in rechartering, but we have other options. We could not recharter, close the working group, declare it done. But if we do decide to recharter, we need text. So, I'll give you a brief overview of some of the things people have mentioned. Stephen, can you just hit the next slide there?
Well, why don't we just ask people, does anybody want us to close?
Yeah. Are you in this working group and want this working group to close? Which, I mean, some of us wouldn't mind if it closed. But do you actively want it to close? So no one has come here to try to shut it down.
Okay.
And our area directors also aren't standing at the mic line saying, please, dear God, close. Oh, right. Area directors need more work. So we put a call out for topics that people might be interested in doing for the recharter. I don't know that we can put all of these things in a new charter, but we actually have some presentations that people want to put forward. That's the things on the left-hand column. And then things on the right-hand column are things that other people have mentioned, or either directly to the chairs or on list or in back channels. So there's a lot of different points here that are possible.
Hi, this is Roman. I have no kind of position on what we're recharting it, other than I just wanted to point out the link to Keytrans. We are in the midst of potentially chartering that working group. It is about to go, it's going to be on the next telechat with the ISG, then it's going to go to the community. If you think that there is something important about how OpenPGP needs to think about that problem, please review that charter and provide that feedback. We've gotten a little bit, but if there's more to give, please give it.
Sure.
Thank you, Roman. So I'm not going to go into these in detail right now. We have, again, like I said, we have people who are willing to present on these topics on the right-hand side. But just wanted to give you a sense of the sorts of things that might be included in a recharter. We want to talk a little bit about how the rechartering might happen, how the group might proceed with the recharter. Next slide. Yeah, so if we decide to recharter, which it sounds like people are interested in doing, we need the actual text. There is a Git repository that's currently publicly hosted here at GitLab in the OpenPGP working group, and we can do merge requests there. We recommend that you also mention the text that you want on the list. Stephen and I were thinking that we could try to get all the text proposed by the end of August. It's about 5 weeks away, 6 weeks away. And then maybe we can have a virtual interim in mid-September where we could try to wrap this up and give a proposed charter to the area directors. Does that sound right?
Yeah. So I mean, once the working group are happy with a draft of a proposed charter, we'll hand it over, and then it will take like another month or 6 weeks or whatever, all going well, for the ISG to process it and hit the buttons, and then we should hopefully be rechartered by the meeting in Prague. So, but yeah, might take longer if people have like comments, but that'll be a typical thing.
Yep. So if anybody has any comments or suggestions on how the recharting process might go, we can take them now. Otherwise, Stephen and I will put a call out on the mailing list with a proposed deadline for getting text into the charter. Aaron, I see you in the queue. Step up.
Hi. Does this mean that the recharting would happen after the Prague meeting, most likely?
So we can't predict precisely. The process basically is the working group will propose to the ISG via our area director, here's some text we'd like for our new charter, and then the ISG will comment on that. Then they'll send it out for review to the community more broadly, and then after they get any feedback from that, they would approve it or ask us to change stuff. So you can't predict exactly, but typically about 6 weeks or so after we propose some text to them, if our text is sane, they'll probably have done all the process stuff, and it'll be rechartered. But we don't disappear in the meantime. We still exist.
Yeah. Okay. Imagine. But like this means, please.
No, I was going to say, I mean, what Stephen said, minimally just to run those 3 processes is 6 weeks, give or take, kind of scheduling, which may be kind of 7 or 8. And that just means everything is going right, but that's how long the community calls kind of take.
Okay.
But we could, in principle, if we did it in September, we could be rechartered if everything kind of glided well by Prague.
Okay.
I mean, typically, I don't. Go ahead.
The calls for the topics, like would that be implicit into the rechartering, or would that be again another explicit call on the list waiting 6 weeks?
So the rechartering is about what topics the working group can consider, and then explicit adoption of a draft would have to come, I think, after the recharter. Yeah. We can't adopt a draft that's not in charter. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you have to stop work on the draft. I know there are several drafts that are out there and outstanding that people are working on, and we certainly wouldn't want you to just like sit idly if there's things that you think need doing in the meantime. And we can continue, the mailing list will remain open. We can have discussion.
Absolutely. I mean, just to reiterate, again, I'm not getting the business how our working group chairs are running this working group, and it's been running kind of really well. We charted this group with a very kind of strict kind of charter. Finish your core thing. Don't do anything else. It's a distraction. Like, you must finish this. At this point, you've given me that document. So by all means, kind of talk about other kind of stuff, and let's work on the recharter.
So we should start distracting ourselves. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thanks for the clarification questions, Aaron. So Stephen and I will follow up after this meeting on list to set some goals with for the charter text. And so as we work through the rest of the agenda today, which are mostly discussions about these recharting topics, please think about how you would frame a charter text to include something that you think is worth including, or to exclude things that you think we should not be working on. We probably don't want the charter to be the bulleted laundry list that I had on the previous slide. So think about how you might want to propose text that works for the charter there. Yep. So there, Mallory just asked to go back to this slide to see like all the different things people have mentioned. This probably isn't actually all the things. There's probably more things that I failed to pull in on this slide, but these are specifics.
Yeah, but if there's something that you want to be done that's not on here, now is the time to raise that. Today or on the list in the next few weeks.
Yep.
Mallory Nodal, CDT. So, I mean, are you thinking of these topics as like individual extensions to PGP? Like, how would it work in practice? You're obviously not going to try to revise the document you've just finished. And
no, we're not
right?
going to produce an RFC 4880 bis.
Is it gonna be? So it's extensions then, is what you're suggesting?
Yeah. So, for example, this post-quantum would probably be some code point allocation. So, adding new things to specific registries. There might be there's stuff that's adding new types of subpackets. There's specifications about sort of community conventions around how we use elements or don't use elements.
Right.
So those sorts of things, which are not part of the core specification, but might be additions to IANA registries or just documents about how we do things.
Okay, because I think that might be useful for the charter, or at least maybe to talk about in this working group, like how to approach these things. And I'm thinking also of like the protocol maintenance suggestions that have made, like how do you take one protocol but extend it, and what are best practices around that? Because it matters for practicality. Like maybe some of these things could be grouped.
Yeah.
But maybe some of them really ought not to be. And then that will, I think has implications for how people work on this. Because it could be that the work all happens in parallel. Anyway, so just a suggestion on thinking that through a little bit more, maybe at an interim or something like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, the idea that we're not going to serialize a lot of this work. I think it would be a mistake to serialize it. A lot of it could be done in parallel. And that may mean that there are people who are, who pick one particular thing and want to push it forward. And they just get feedback from the list, and they're driving the discussion on that one topic, and we have several things running at the same time. Unlike our previous very monomaniacally focused get the crypto refresh out that we've been doing thus far. So it's a little more complicated to run. So I think we can go on to the first topic, which is the post-quantum topic. Falco, are you present? Can you put yourself in the queue or turn your... Hey, there we go.
Yeah. So, Falco, would you like me to give you the slide control?
How does it work?
I'll just, you say next slide, and then I'll hit the button.
This way. Okay. Okay, yeah. Then, okay, yeah. So this is joint work. The PQC introduction to OpenPGP's joint work between MTG AG and the BSI and Proton. So there's a project we have mentioned previously in previous sessions, which is contracted out by the BSI and worked on by, I forgot the University of Eindhoven also is in the project, and Proton joined us, or we joined with Proton to work on this together with Aaron, and who is also actually the main author of our draft. Okay, next slide, please. So we have recently published a new draft, 02, and we also have a public repository where the draft can be commented on. Yes, next slide, please. So basically today, all that we want to report is the recent developments, the changes to the current draft version. So we have revised the CAM construction a little bit. So due to efficiency and security reasons. So for efficiency reasons, we dropped one hashing and of the public key. When we now have all the hashing of the public key done in the KDF of the individual schemes, the component schemes, because we have these hybrid schemes combining classical and traditional and PQC schemes. And yeah, this is already the case for Kyber in any case, and now it's also done for the EC schemes. And then we have we had talked about PQC also at the OpenPGP email summit. There were two things discussed. One was about allowing encryption not only for v6 keys and v6 PKSK as we intended previously. Now we also want to allow it with v4 keys, and then of course with v3 PKSK, but also with v6 keys and allowing v3 PKSK in order to enable communication with clients that have, well, not v6 keys. And then there was another idea we had discussed again about the combination of the security levels of the traditional and the PQC schemes. And but we decided not to change this. We have not matching classical security levels, but we have higher security levels. We are, for instance, we're not using the low security levels, the lowest security levels for the structured lattices for Kyber and dilithium, because we want to keep a security margin. So this is what we agreed, that we keep this security margin and don't align these security levels. Okay, that is it. Feedback, comments are welcome. Yeah. And Aaron, maybe Aaron, if Aaron wants to add anything, he's here also. So please, Aaron, if you want to add anything.
So I guess a question would be for the for the group and for yourselves is how might we reflect this kind of post-quantum work in the charter? I mean, I guess we want to definitely probably include some kind of CAM work with CAMs, and maybe we want to do that up front. Maybe we want to talk about signatures. Maybe we don't want to talk about signatures at all. So I think we'll need to turn this into some charter text to say which parts of the post-quantum universe do we want to try and tackle in maybe in roughly what order. So feedback on that would be good. Aaron.
Hi, thank you, Mike, for the presentation. I think you covered everything. I wouldn't like it to end up like LAMPs, where they split up the two drafts into CAMs and signatures. I think we do, I mean, already passing from the monolith we just developed to something that just adds some algorithms makes sense to keep it together to avoid the redundancy and try to deploy it at the same time, especially given that dilithium and Kyber have have a lot of implementation commonality.
Ori Steele, Transmute. So I'm a bit disconnected from the more recent updates, but I was wondering if there are pure quantum code points that you have that would line up with the pure quantum code points in LAMPs and the pure quantum code points in COSI and HOSI, because, thank you. One of the things that I've been sort of tasked to do at this IETF is to go around and make sure that if we can see parameter sets alignment, if we can see that the same things are being registered 3 or 4 times, that we can keep track of that. And if we see them starting to fray apart in the parameter space, like to say at the very least, hey, we're acknowledging that we see this happening. And in the context that you only have hybrid post-quantum stuff, that is a fraying to some degree based on what's happened in LAMPs and what hasn't yet happened in COSI and HOSI. So to just make it a little bit clear, I would like to see some pure quantum signature schemes that I could line up with the HOSI and COSI work at the least. That's it.
Aaron?
respond to this one, since I was like aligning with Mike regarding having same encryption schemes. We do have pure quantum that is Sphinx plus. We chose to have a more conservative approach for Kyber and Dilithium, and those are only offered into hybrid format. But we do not exclude that if the community thinks the algorithms are mature enough for standalone standardization, it could also be done. We're not against it a priori. I think that also the matching between the various security level has tried to match the Mike's proposal at LAMPS. And I do not know whether aligning completely COSA user and OpenPGP makes a lot of sense, because we have very, very different usages. So we are a big, bulky truck that moves very slow. And I do not know whether that would hit our other protocols, let's say it like this. Sorry for saying this about OpenPGP.
Yeah, no, you're doing a great sales job. Okay, so I guess, as is typical, we'll have to figure out some charter text. At some point, we'll have to figure out what kind of selections of post-quantum things we want to include. That won't necessarily be all done while chartering. I guess it wouldn't, we'll be doing that as the work proceeds. So, okay, thank you. I think that's our post-quantum thing. The next slide deck was. That's you.
So I want to talk about the stateless OpenPGP API, which is currently the foundation for our interop test suite. Next slide, please. So I've been maintaining this stateless OpenPGP API, which we know as SOP, which stands for Stateless OpenPGP. It is a minimalist high-level interface. So it is the sort of thing that you would imagine a fairly ignorant application developer that wants to use OpenPGP would use. It's currently implemented as a command line interface. There's been some talk about either a networked interface or a C shared object, like a library interface for it. But the goal is minimalism and not a lot of complication. That means that as an implementer, if you implement this, you have to make some conscious decisions when you're generating data about what goes on the wire. And the goal here is to force implementers to make the decisions and see what decisions they make. And at the same time, when you consume data, you have to handle whatever other people produce. So it's good for interop testing. This interop test suite, which is run by the Sequoia team, has been really great in raising our understanding about what the ecosystem actually looks like and what we can support and what we can't, and where there are probably ambiguities in the spec. And it's also just really useful for describing what we think OpenPGP can offer to application developers who are considering whether to use OpenPGP in a given context or not. So I think it's been fairly successful at doing those things, but I'm currently the maintainer for it. It is not a working group thing. Next slide. So I'm proposing to include this API into the charter. We have we currently have a bunch of implementations of varying degrees of completeness. A bunch of projects are natively supporting it. And then we have a wrapper that wraps around some library implementations for the GNU-PG project and the RNP project. If you're an implementer and you haven't done this and you're struggling with it, or you're just not sure, feel free to come and talk to me, or also ask questions on the list. People are pretty responsive to it. But I would like to turn change control over this over to the working group if the working group is interested. Next slide. I think that's my last slide. My big questions for the working group is if you're looking at a particular extension to OpenPGP and you think it will make a semantic change to the spec, to OpenPGP itself, could you think about how to update the stateless OpenPGP API to reflect that? And this is a way to try to communicate what it is that you're trying to do. Some changes won't have any semantic consequences, and so there's no change that needs to be made. But my big question, if we turn this over to the working group, is can we keep it simple? I think it would be a mistake to turn this over to the working group and then have the working group immediately stuff 25 different options with potentially conflicting and confused semantics in. One of the challenges of maintaining something like this is thinking about it going forward. You don't want to have to change, you don't want to put stuff in and then rip it out and then tweak stuff. I've already made those mistakes several times with this API. And so I'm sure it's not like we'll never do it again, but I want to, you know, I want to turn over to the working group with the goal of having the working group keep it nice and compact, concise. So I'm going to propose text for the charter that will have the working group, you know, that states the working group does work on this. If folks think this is a terrible idea, I'd like to hear about it. If people think it's a good idea, I'm also happy to hear that too, or any other feedback. That's what I got.
So given that one of the chairs is proposing this, I think it would be useful to get some positive feedback that we should include it from a non-chair. I also think it's a good idea, but so we would appreciate some feedback saying, yes, do this, as opposed to just chairs stuffing it in.
Okay, Paolo, this is not an idea at all. I think this is a good idea. We should do this.
Good.
Thanks. That's good to hear.
And also on the, I mean, I think in a sense it's a no-brainer. It's like keep testing interoperability. Sure. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
So I think next is automatic forwarding.
Hello. Me again. First of all, yes, I also think it's a great idea to do SOP.
Thank you.
And found so many bugs that I think it's already worth it. So what has been done so far. But I'm here to present automatic forwarding. Some of you might have already seen it. But this is a compact addition to OpenPGP that extends a few code points and can include automatic forwarding. This means forwarding. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. That can preserving end-to-end encryption can transform a ciphertext from one recipient to the other, therefore allowing automatic forwarding, server-based. I'm out of the office and I want to forward my email for a week to a colleague, or distribution lists that scale up easily to hundreds of users without performance drawback, and being able to perform these transformations onto a server, not onto a mobile device or a client. Next slide. So I've already presented how in detail at, I think, the OpenPGP Summit 2022, but in very short as a recap is proxy transformation onto ECDH curve 25519, and we distribute the trust across two entities. One is the final forwarding recipient and one is the server. If they collude, some bad things can happen, but not too bad. More details in the draft. It introduces a new key usage flag. It means that this key is meant to read forwarded messages only in order to prevent use this key as a normal public key. Next slide, please. What I'm really here to present today is the updates we had since the last IETF and since the last presentation. We published draft 00 that you can find in a data tracker. We have a complete implementation in both OpenPGP.js and GoPuPGP, and we started deploying it internally to make sure that this works, but we're not sending any transformed packet or any transformed key outside. So we won't pollute the environment with something that is not an official, at least chartered, a chartered draft. Furthermore, you have seen before that X25519 and X448 got some changes, and these will affect forwarding. The draft itself right now covers only V4, so it's not a problem, and V3 KSK. But there is a way to do forwarding also with these transformations. It's just that we need to specify how. And next slide, please. This slide is 3 months too early, probably. But I will ask if we can get at least some attention in the future charter. I'll propose some text if you don't speak up and tell me it's a very bad idea now.
So now's the time for other people to get in the queue to, if they want to comment on the work here. Again, think a little bit about how you would consider this in terms of rechartering. I am not seeing anybody joining the queue. I will say that I have some questions about what the implications are for the larger ecosystem about having this forwarding mechanism. I know that surreptitious forwarding has been seen as a potential problem in OpenPGP in the past, and so I think we need to be real careful about how we mark and flag this and think about what the implications are for the application developers and for the users who might use it.
I mean, the key flag change that we introduced a while back was actually your suggestion, so you have only yourself to blame.
Thanks.
But
I'm not saying I got it right either.
No. I think it's actually that is especially meant to identify a key that is meant for forwarding only and is not meant to be used for other purposes, such as file or message encryption, so that a message that is forwarded is clearly labeled in the mail user agent or into the decryption process as this message was forwarded to you and it has been transformed.
So good. Yeah, and yeah, thanks for having a draft. I think that's really useful as we do the chartering discussion in the coming weeks. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so next is, I think, Daniel. Yep. Daniel's just arrived in perfect timing.
Yes, sorry for being a bit late.
No.
Something came up and I lost track of time, so apologies. Yes, so this is a short recap presentation of a presentation that I gave almost exactly 1 year ago about persistent symmetric keys in OpenPGP. So next slide, please. Yeah, so the status quo in OpenPGP is that we can easily store and manage persistent asymmetric keys in, for example, a keyring or a transferable private key. And you can have ephemeral symmetric keys, which are used for a single message or are derived from a password, for example. But you can't easily have a symmetric key stored in a transferable private key or a keyring that you use to encrypt multiple messages, for example. So next slide, please. So that's essentially what we're trying to solve here or propose a solution for is yeah, a way to store symmetric key material in a transferable private key and then use that to encrypt messages so that when you, for example, want to change your password, you don't have to re-encrypt all of those messages. So next slide, please. So why would we want to do this? Well, why do we want to use symmetric cryptography? Well, of course, there are many cases where we need asymmetric cryptography. And since, well, OpenPGP is about communication, we usually assume that it's necessary. But there are some cases where it's not, and I'll get to that. But when you don't need asymmetric cryptography, symmetric cryptography is faster and the keys are smaller and it's more resistant to quantum attacks. And when we don't need asymmetric cryptography, it means we also don't have to worry about all the downsides of post-quantum algorithms, such as even worse performance and even bigger keys and so on. Next slide, please. Yes, so what are those cases where symmetric encryption is sufficient? Well, backup is one, or personal file storage. One is drafts and send messages. Currently, it's quite common practice to encrypt drafts and send messages with your own key, but that's still an asymmetric key. So you're paying the overhead of asymmetric cryptography in that case, where it's not really needed. And then similarly, for incoming messages, you could actually re-encrypt them for archival, which would mean that, yeah, your email archive is more secure, and you don't have to worry about, okay, if my email archive gets compromised in 1 year or in 10 years, and someone might have broken RSA or ECDH by then all my messages will be out in the open, right? So next slide, please. Yeah, then similarly, for symmetric signatures or message authentication codes, there are some use cases as well. So maybe most straightforwardly, if you just want to store a file and make sure that it isn't tampered with, but you don't particularly care about secrecy, then you can use a symmetric signature if you want, or a MAC in that case. And similarly for key binding signatures, if you want to have a purely symmetric OpenPGP key, you could generate a symmetric primary key and a symmetric subkey, and also all the binding signatures to store information about the key could be MACs instead. And finally, for email archival, you could, for example, verify the signatures of the messages that you receive at the time of receival, and then store the verification result, so that if at some point in the future the hash algorithm or the signature algorithm gets compromised, you can still be reasonably sure that at the time of verification, the signature was probably trustworthy, if it wasn't compromised yet at that time. Yeah, next slide, please. So what's the concrete proposed solution here? It's to define 2 new public key algorithms, which is a bit of a hack, namely AEAD and HMAC. And then to compensate for the hack, we propose retconning the public key algorithm registry to persistent key algorithms instead. And then similarly, we reuse the packets. So the secret key packet, secret subkey packet, the signature packet, and the public key encrypted session key packet for storing such keys and messages, well, session keys encrypted with such keys and signatures, namely MACs. And the reason we do this is because the semantics of all of these packets perfectly match everything that we need and want to do with them. It's just that the names don't match, right? So rather than defining 4 new packets for all of these things just to have better names, we propose reusing the packets, but then sort of retconning the names to make them more generic and make the names reflect the semantics rather than the algorithms, if that makes sense. So similarly, we propose to retcon the public key encrypted session key packet to persistent key encrypted session key packet. Did I say that correctly? Persistent key encrypted session key packet, yes. It's a mouthful, I know. And then the symmetric key encrypted session key packet to string to key encrypted session key packet, which also more closely matches the semantics of what that packet does, which is to encrypt a session key with a key derived from a password or passphrase, rather than to say, okay, this is the packet that needs to use symmetric cryptography, and this is the packet that needs to use asymmetric cryptography. Next slide, please. So there is a draft for this now that you can go and read, although I would prefer that you read the latest version on GitLab because it has fewer typos. And also, we have experimental implementations of this in openpgp.js and GoCrypto /GopenPGP. So yeah, we're planning to use this internally at Proton, but we would prefer that it is something that is standardized, and we think that it might also be useful for other OpenPGP applications. But obviously, we're open to feedback, both to the idea in general and also this specific proposed solution. So next slide, please. So yeah, those are basically the questions. Do you all think it makes sense to include this in the charter? And if so, do you think this is a reasonable solution? And do you have any other comments on the draft? Thank you.
So now's a good time to comment if you do think this is good to include or not good to include. Yeah, I guess you're good. Phil, you look like you were about to say something.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to do. You might want to consider also the mode where you have a hybrid, in that one of the ways of doing post-quantum is you have just one symmetric key that's common. Instead of doing Kyber along with everything else, you just do it once for a group or whatever, and then reuse it again and again and again to give yourself the post-quantum thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Quinn suggested maybe using the show of hands tool, but actually maybe we won't, because I think we'll rather have some discussion on the list of the general topics first.
Sure.
And yeah, we've had 3 or 4 things, but there's no negative reaction. I imagine there'll be some positive reaction on the list.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anybody else in the queue?
I just mentioned also that Kai in the chat mentions that another use case might be to be able to drop old smart cards. I think that refers to your re-encryption of your archive use case.
And in general, key rotation is actually a strong use case that I probably should have mentioned. So if you want to rotate your asymmetric keys once in a while, then you can re-encrypt all your emails with a symmetric key and keep that locally or in wherever you want to keep it secure. Thank you.
DKG again wants to clean up things.
Yes. So I am shouldering the cleanup task here. I'm the person who comes in after the elephants and tries to make the circus ready again. Next slide, please. Right. So OpenPGP is a document format that deals with stored data. We have historical data that lies around. We can't ever do the kind of cleanup that TLS can do, where they get to say, sorry, you can no longer speak TLS with us, because inevitably implementations have to cope with legacy or archival data. In the course of doing the crypto refresh, we have added to a little bit of the mess. And that's just, I think, the nature of the beast. So my question is, how much can we include cleanup work in the recharter, given the scope that we've got here? Next slide here. I've got a number of specific things that have accumulated over the course of the crypto refresh that we decided were out of scope, given the status of the charter, that I think might be worth to go ahead and fix up. So this is one. I'm going to go through, I think there's 4 examples here. Might be 5. So in the course of this, we realized that the designated revoker subpacket has problems. We've actually known that it has problems for a while. It embeds an unversioned fingerprint on the wire. It isn't usable by a relying party that can't find the proper key that's supposed to do verification. This is a subpacket that's supposed to say, oh, Daniel, this is my certificate, but if Paul wants to revoke it, he can, for example. And it's actually very hard to use correctly. And it's hard to put on the wire. And then we changed the size of the fingerprint, and so then that makes it different. So there's a bunch of things that made it sort of clunky, and we basically just said, we're not going to fix this right now for the revision that we just did. We're going to deprecate it. And the proposal here is we resurrect this thing with the problem solved. We don't put fingerprints on the wire. We put an entire public key packet on the wire, and we say, so it doesn't need to point to Paul. It just says this key is capable of doing revocations. You don't have to find it. You don't have to go out and fetch it because you actually have the key material. You don't have to worry about fingerprint size. We don't have any current implementations for this. We actually have a reserved code point for it. We could put this in the charter. Next slide. Okay, this is known as, so attestation signatures are a way that someone can say, this is my OpenPGP certificate, and I am happy with the following parties certifying it. One of the problems with OpenPGP is if you have an OpenPGP certificate, anybody can add a certification, and the default sort of naive rules are when you get an OpenPGP certificate, hey, look, I found one that has even more certifications on it. Let me just copy those in, and the certificate can grow without bound. That's a problem because people can attack you with that. My OpenPGP certificates have been attacked in that way, kind of a drag. So it would be nice if we could say, here are certifications that the key holder wants to propagate. Again, we have some reserved code points for it. They were kind of out of scope. We actually have a couple of implementations that produce these things. I don't know of anybody who's really consuming them. We need to talk to the folks who do key redistribution to decide whether that's feasible, but we could put this into the charter. I'll just note the acronym here, 1PA3PC is first party attested third party certifications, just because it's a fuzzy concept, so we like to have annoying acronyms for them. Mike, you're in the queue.
Just a pesky clarification question. This use of the word attestation like predates all the RATS stuff, right? Like
Does it predate them? It is a different concept. This is not attesting to the state of the software or the hardware on the
state
machine.
of the private key storage.
Right. This is that the first party. We needed some way that the first party could say, this third party certification is something that I like. And so we decided the first party was attesting to it was a reasonable way to say that. If you have other words we could use to, sorry, or you said endorsement. Sure. I mean, yeah, the words are hard. Yeah, naming is hard. Anyway, we could put this in the charter if we want to, or find a way to fit this into the charter. Next slide. RFC 4880, RFC 2440, RFC 1991, and the crypto refresh draft all say that the convention for user IDs is that they are a RFC 2822 name adder, but they aren't. If you look at the user IDs that are out in the world, they are not RFC 2822 name adders. This is a bunch of nerdery here. If you're into email, maybe some of it makes sense to you. Most of it doesn't make any sense at all unless you care about the details, but it's just wrong. We've been saying the wrong thing for about 20 years. So the proposal here is maybe we could put it in charter to say the right thing. I think we can actually simplify things quite a bit and say what people in the community actually do. It's pretty close to a name adder, but it's not a name adder. So next slide, please. We could put that in the charter. When you send a PGP MIME message today with a V4 signature, you include in the MIME structure, in the content type, what the signature algorithm is. So your signature is made over SHA-256, you say MICALG PGP SHA-256, but V6 signatures now include a hash. The reason you include this MICALG is so that you can do a one-pass read of the email message, and by the time you get to the signature, you can say, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and run the verification because I've already digested it correctly. You can't do that in a V6 signature because you need the salt before you start hashing everything. So what do? We have a couple options. We can try to stuff the salt in the MIME header as well. We could say, you can't do that. No one-pass verification of multi-part signed email messages. This is similar to what we ran into with the clear text signing framework, where we tried to put a hash salt in the header so that you could do a one-pass verification, and then we discovered that actually breaks a number of implementations that took seriously the old specification of clear text signing framework that said you can't have anything at the beginning of a clear text signed message other than a hash marker. So anyway, we have some decisions about what to do here. It's not clear what the right answer is. It's not even clear that you currently can do a one-pass verification because you don't know whether the signature that you're going to get is a text mode or a binary mode signature, and your hashing context would produce something different. So I personally lean towards the idea that we would say no more one-pass processing of email messages, ignore the MICALG parameter. But other people might think of something different. So we could put this in the charter to argue about it in this group and try to produce a document that says what to do here. Next slide. Anyway, that's examples of little bits of jankiness that are out there in the ecosystem. We could try to put some of this in the charter. I don't really know that we want to put specific bullet points for each of the things that I just presented, but I wanted to give you like an overview of the kinds of things, little things that are broken around the edges that we might want to put in as cleanup. And I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts about how to frame that for the charter, or do we not want to bother with this stuff? Is this the wrong place to do it? Should we push some of this stuff out somewhere else? Just want to hear if people have any thoughts about it.
Aaron, go ahead.
If I haven't scared you yet, I had thought, I had proposed a while to put an expiration date on algorithms. That can be extended, but at least there is a way to say, hey, this algorithm, we need to stop using it by 2050 or something like this. I do not know whether that could fit in a charter or in any sane idea, but I think aiming at a general cleanup rather than specifying a single bullet points, it might be a little bit better. Then you let the working group decide anyway what is in the charter. Like, what does this charter apply to?
Thanks. The idea of scheduled algorithm deprecation did not make it into the earlier slide about things to potentially put in the charter, but that's a really interesting point as well. I can see how that looks like cleanup. I think it might be even bigger. We might have a very interesting IETF-wide conversation if we put scheduled algorithmic deprecation in here, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
So DKG, I had a question on that cleanup topic. Does that envisage doing a BIS of the 4880 BIS turd, whatever?
I don't think it involves a 4880 turd. No.
Okay.
I think each of those things are, you know, specific code points or you know, an updates maybe, but not an obsoletes.
Okay, so at least what you envisage is rather a new RFC that updates the one that was you've just produced.
That's right, and would maybe, you know, ask IANA to allocate a code point or two in some of the registries that already exist thanks to the crypto refresh.
Okay, so I think that's the end of the presentations about things. Now is, I guess, a good time if there's items on the right-hand side of the slide that you would like to speak to.
Or things that don't show up here.
Or things that don't show up.
Like Aaron just mentioned, the scheduled.
Sure. And speaking to them could say, that's a terrible idea, don't go near it, or that's a great idea, I'd like to see it.
Or, hey, we could cluster a bunch of these together under this particular heading in the charter, at which point you will likely be volunteered to propose more concrete text on the list.
Great, we have people joining the queue. More the merrier for the one we have time for this discussion. I think it's useful to have it while we're all here. So, Ori.
Cool. Ori Steele, Transmute. On the, you know, sort of key trends sort of topic, the SCIT working group for securing supply chain integrity and transparency, PGP has come up a lot recently, particularly in securing, you know, or making transparent existing processes that are out in the wild where software is signed with PGP. And so one of the things we've been discussing on the SCIT list a lot is, okay, is making PGP keys transparent in a SCIT transparency service a prerequisite for integrating and supporting what is happening in the wild with PGP regarding securing software supply chain. So I just wanted to say that here with you all in the room. If you feel the interest to hop over to the SCIT list and search for PGP, you'll find interesting comments around it. And it has some overlap with how keytrans may or may not be relevant as the chartering continues for that. So just, you know, the one extra piece that I would say is SCIT has this concept of making well-known media types transparent, and OpenPGP and many other systems have been operating in a media type landscape for quite some time. So if you feel strongly about software, you know, supply chain transparency, and you really enjoy using the PGP media types, don't hesitate to say so on the SCIT list. That's it.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yes, so I just wanted to speak up as I proposed some of the topics on the right-hand side of this slide. So for example, forward secrecy is always brought up as one of the criticisms of OpenPGP, as one of the things that it doesn't have. So I am not sure what form of the solution to that should look like, but I think it's something we should at least discuss. And then, yeah, definitely key transparency stuff as well. Yeah, I mean, many of the other things as well, but I mean, yeah, there's a lot to discuss. But I'm in favor of most of these things, I would say.
Okay. So one I would like to get some feedback on is this. Oh, you can't see the mouse. So the top of the list there, which is the fingerprint human interface, QR codes. How do you display these things? It's a kind of it comes up all the time, and nobody has a good answer. So I think it would be good to rule it in or out of the charter work.
Sorry to jump in again first. I just wanted to say one concrete point, which is that there is this concrete URL scheme for OpenPGP v4 fingerprints in QR codes that we might want to specify and might also want to have an equivalent for v6 keys for. So that, in my opinion, would definitely make sense to look at that.
Okay. Mallory?
It seems to me there's at least some minor overlap between this and key transparency. So if that's a goal, maybe lumping them together. You might not get all of the things comma separated in that first bullet, but you might get some of them.
But I guess the specific question though is whether we include the user interface issues as in scope or not, right? Because it's an atypical thing for an IETF working group to do, to consider user interfaces. But we know that the situation is pretty crap.
Follow this individual. I do think things like QR code, it's more than just a user interface. Like, it's actually pretty limited. It's not that we can screw up the user interface and get it wrong. It's a QR code. So it's more of a specification of how to encode things and exchange it. So I think that it would be more in scope.
Just saying this is what you put in a QR code without saying how the QR code actually gets used by humans is something that we can screw up. So it's entirely possible to screw it up by saying, here's what you put in the QR code and have no thought whatsoever about like what people do with it. And then all of the FUD around QR codes is just now attached indefinitely to OpenPGP instead of saying, no, there's a process here. And here's how we expect it. Now, I agree with you. I don't want us to specify a GUI. But it would be nice to at least say, here's how we imagine the QR code being used in, like, is it on a piece of physical media? What is your reader's process? Those kinds of questions I think would need to be, we would need to at least touch on them and not just say, this is the string.
Sure. No, no, I agree with you. I'm just saying, like, this is not like how do we get a plugin in Firefox to look, right? Like it's fairly constrained.
Okay, but you're arguing for including that. Okay.
Roman Danilio, No Hack, Carnegie Mellon University. So I would volley back. If we're concerned about getting it right, who do we need to loop in to give us confidence that we did it right? And are they here? And can we do it?
So, yeah, fair point. I mean, I think we do have some user agent implementers involved in the work. And yeah. Peter?
Peter Castleman. If you're going to be doing things with QR codes, I think you should give as much guidance as possible about how they get used. In the OAuth world, we've had some significant token theft issues that resulted from that. There's currently a BCP in the works that you may want to reference for some guidance, but that sort of QR codes has been a rich vector for cross-device consent phishing attacks. So please give guidance.
Thank you. Would you mind putting a pointer to the pending BCP work either on a list or in Zulip here?
I'll put it, can I put it in the chat?
Yeah,
Zulip
Zulip is the chat. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the feedback we're getting there is that yes, we're in the user interface design business. God help us. Okay, the other one that I think I would appreciate feedback on is the Web of Trust point. It's not, I think some of these are relatively clear. If somebody's willing to do the work, it makes sense to include. Other ones like the user interface stuff are less clear if it's wise to try and do the work. So I think if somebody was able to speak to this kind of Web of Trust point, I think that would be useful. Again, arguing to say, yeah, this is a good thing to include, or no, run away. don't do that. Ori.
All right, or Steele. So I guess what I'll say here is that if this web of trust concept comes up also in SCIT in the context of Transparency Service Federation, if there is some overlap between that keytrans and the fingerprinting pieces, because as part of a discovery, I might want confidence around additional relationships between the keys that I'm pulling from one transparency service and their confidence in other keys related to other transparency services. I know I'm saying a word you guys probably don't deal with a lot here. It's transparency service word all the time, but these are kind of trust domains that have policies around how keys get included. And they do have a mapping that is, you know, in my head, but also being discussed actively in the context of SCIT for how SCIT transparency services and federation might look like OpenID Federation, or might look like other sort of federation sort of use cases. And every time the word federation comes up, people sort of point to Web of Trust and they say, well, this is why we need, you know, our federation. Web of Trust stuff, that doesn't work. Maybe there's a good opportunity there if you are already sort of creating discoverable identifiers and you're bringing along some service and some other sort of pieces. The Web of Trust piece could be sort of addressed together with that. I could see those three things sort of packaged together in a way that both helped with user experience, prevented the kind of cross-device theft issues we've seen in other contexts. Just a thought.
Sure. Thank you. Do you recall where this point came from on the list? Who suggested it, or what?
I think this is something that has come up with some of the work that the Sequoia project is doing. They've been doing sort of network identity certification path kind of work. Yeah. And then there's a group that's doing an OpenPGP CA as well, with the idea that an organization can publish sort of certificate authority key for their organization, which in turn is granted via trust signatures the ability to identify other certificates that belong to people in that organization. So,
okay, Aaron?
I agree with Ori that we have a big issue when it comes to determining which CA or which authority will publish keys on behalf of someone. While this is clear if we use WKD, I say, okay, it's the domain owner that takes care of that. It might not be as clear once you start having distributed systems. So I would also think that that touches a few of the points on the right-hand side, WKD, HKP, but as well as key trans.
Yeah, in fact, the WKD and HKP, that was the next point I wanted to get some feedback on. Because again, it's, you know, it's not one of those things where if somebody just wants to do the work, it makes total sense to go ahead. So let's, Aaron, go ahead again.
I would be the happiest to have WKD V2 or something that allows also expanding with V6 keys or a bit more flexible implementation. But already committing to the work on on PQC and forwarding, I do not know whether I have the pipeline. So it's
sure.
You're in luck that we're not asking for permanent commitments right now, Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's entirely understandable if there's topics that people would like to see work done on, but we don't include them in the charter now because we don't think it's credible that we'd get it done before the universe ends. So, you know, it's okay that there's things we want to do, but we haven't got the bandwidth for it. That's okay. Mike?
And just the same, Mike Ounsworth, just the same thing. Putting it in the charter doesn't, you know, having volunteers is not a prereq for putting it in the charter, right?
Correct. But on the other hand, we don't want to promise to boil the ocean.
Hi, Roman Dinu. As AD, to the point of not boiling the ocean and do we have energy, the other thing we need when we talk about charters is the milestones associated with the date. And one of the things we could do is signal sequencing. Like we will work on these first, we will work on these later.
Yeah, or you might, you know, or something like, you know, WKD version 2 or something. That could be, It could be something that you say we're not doing, but we might recharter to do later. It's all open for that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that's kind of the list of things that where I thought it might be useful for me to get some feedback on these specific bullets.
And we're going to depend on people proposing text in the charter, and then as we discuss what we put into the charter, and probably at the interim, we will at that point probably try to ask people for some commitments about who might be willing to step up as the lead editors if these things are broken out into separate pieces.
And yeah, and it will be much more credible to suggest a topic when there's a draft.
That's right. Yeah. So if you see any of this and you're like, this absolutely should be in scope, put a draft out there so that I know some of you already have, but put a draft out there and let people know.
Yeah, to Romanino again, back to the idea of what's credible charter. If you have scope, but there's no milestones, it's less credible that it should be kind of in there depending on how we massage and kind of make that text. So for every new piece of text we put in, there needs to be a corresponding milestone for it of some sort.
We will produce fictional milestones.
That's the only ones I aspire to.
I think we're
good.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're again. If anybody wants to jump into the queue, we have time. If people don't want to jump into the queue, I think we're at a reasonable point to let you get the rest of your week back.
What remains?
I know if anybody has any other business to raise, again, now is a good time. We'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. But I see people are starting to pack bags and wrap up and escape with relief. Great. Okay, so this is the plan. And again, thanks to everybody who helped with the crypto refresh. I think it was a long piece of work. And
I want to also thank the folks who took notes here. Corey and Mike took notes. So yeah, much appreciated.
Great. So we'll talk on the list and in September. Thank you.
Well,
it's not an RFC yet.
We don't have an RFC yet. Come to Prague. Come to Prague.
If it's an RFC by Prague, that's a surprise.
Instead of those boring QR codes, can we do like the fancier ones or the
like these ones? They're not squares anymore. Now they've got
Did you see the
pyramid ones?